Everything that you do in your life, your entire life is a survival act. If you take everything you do, everything you think, everything you believe, everything you say, you sit down with a notepad, or like I have a digital notepad, what you can do is you can actually trace everything that you do back to one central activity that you do. The one thing that's being done by you in reality is you're trying to survive. The reason you're trying to do this is because what reality is imagination. Reality is infinite imagination. And you are being imagined by this empty field. So you yourself are an object, or so you say, you're one of the objects within this field. So you right now watching the video, you are you are being imagined to exist. And here you are. Here you are. So all of life, all of reality is just God's imagination. And you have to try to survive inside of God's imagination. In this dream, you believe that you're a human. And in this dream, what a human is an organism that needs other things. So you go and you get these other things. I just ate food, so now I can't stop belching. You go and get food, you go and get water, you go and get shelter, you go and get social approval, you go and get sex, you go and get entertainment, um, you go and improve yourself, so on and so on. You have faith, you might have some sort of religion, you might have something that some sort of inspiration. And all of this stuff is survival activity. But you don't just survive physically, because your physical experience, what you call your physical experience, right? You have a body, you believe that reality is physical. What you call your physical experience is this empty field imagining physicality. So the field is imagining that physics exists, and here it is. And so the physics itself, the physicalness, like if you do this, it's not really physical, but the concept of physics is being imagined. When you do that, physics comes to life. So you don't just survive physically in the way you nourish your body. You either try to avoid getting beat up by other people, let's say, or you learn how to fight and then you defend yourself, and perhaps you beat up other people, to help your body survive. You don't just do that, but you also try to survive mentally, because you don't only identify as your body. You also identify as your thoughts. Notice that throughout the day, there are times where you feel like the body and other times where you feel like your thoughts, even though you yourself can tell a difference between your thoughts and your body. Even though you make that distinction between the two, you often assume the identity of them. So when your mind is thinking stuff, let's say you're in school. Let's say you're in school and you have a project to present tomorrow, or you have a speech to give at school, or at work. Maybe you have a presentation. Um, so what's happening there is, in the back of your mind, you're probably feeling like a little tense, a little worried. Maybe you have a fear of public speaking. If you have a fear of public speaking, when you go public speak, when you go step in front of the class, or wherever to do your presentation, there's a part of you that's on the line. You feel like that those thoughts about yourself that you presenting tomorrow, you feel like that this experience is you. You feel like you're the thing that's creating the thoughts. You feel like you're the thing that's having the thoughts, and you feel like the thing that's maybe rehearsing your lines that's going to deliver those lines later, which brings me to your voice. Your voice is the third thing you identify as. So you don't just identify as the body, you don't just identify as your thoughts, you also identify as the thing that you use to translate the thoughts. And what is your voice other than the combination of both your thoughts and your body? You're using your mouth and your tongue, and you're using your lungs and your diaphragm and the manipulation of air, that's the body, to turn the thoughts into something that you sort of disperse out to other people. And then they use their body, they use their cleverly placed ears to sort of funnel in the noises that you're making and turn those into words that they then uh, they process in their brain, and then you right everybody in society has agreed on what these words mean. So you also serve. So I'm tying this into survival. So your identity is moving around. This is why you get nervous when you speak, is because you identify as the voice. When you're speaking in front of a crowd and you mess up, you say the wrong thing, you stutter, you get a fact wrong, a lot of people don't like silence. You take too long because it looks like you don't know what you're talking about if you take too long. Because you're trying to survive, it feels like death. It feels like you're literally in the spotlight when you public speak, because in that moment you're identifying with the voice. When normally you just identify as the body. If you only identified as the body, then it wouldn't matter to you if when the body started talking, it wouldn't matter what the words were. But that's because your identity is very fluid. So what you're doing when you're in front of a crowd is you're trying to survive. And that's why the experience is nerve wracking. Because if you go up there and you make a fool of yourself in front of your class or in front of your boss, it actually feels like death to your psyche. So your psyche is actually the thing responsible for making it feel like you exist. It's actually generating the feeling that there's a you. But really, it's the psyche itself is just a combination of shit. And that combination of shit put together is the experience that you feel as you, that you feel as like, oh, I exist. And so that thing is always trying to survive. So it basically created you, it created itself, and then now it's trying to survive. Reality, everything in reality itself, remember the base of it, the fundamental part of it is that it is imagination itself. Imagination itself without an imaginer. And so basically, like I said, what you're doing in reality is you're trying to survive. Everything you do is about survival. So that's an example of how you do that with the different things you identify as. I've mentioned before in the past that if we get into a fight, let's say it's me and you, we get into a fight, we're throwing punches, boom, I land one, and I hit you in the jaw or something, you identify as the head in that moment. And the reason you choose to identify as the head in that moment, or why the psyche causes you to believe that that's what you're doing, is because if you identify as the head, if that's you being hit, then the psyche can smuggle in the truth that physics exists, that there's such a thing as a physical reality. So it's actually only doing that. It's only making you identify with things by tying it to survival. Anything your psyche can tie to survival, it can use to keep all of the universe and all of its imaginings to be true. So if it wants physics to exist, then you're going to identify with knee pain. If you get cancer, you're going to identify with that. Like, oh, there's a tumor growing on my hand. You're going to identify with that. If you, if you fall down the stairs, you're like, oh, that hurts so bad. It does that because it's so long as it can keep you busy believing that you're being hurt, that you're being harmed, that it smuggles in physics with it continuously. So you're basically being bombarded with your mind's subconscious suggestions of what's true about the universe. Your mind does not allow you to see these mechanics. It sees it now because I just pointed them out to you. And so now you're going to be noticing it all the time. And this is what it means to increase your consciousness, by the way. You're now conscious and aware that, like, oh, that's true. Like, because otherwise, like, if you were just a vegetable, you wouldn't know what physics was, right? You wouldn't have the mental capacity for it. So your mind only makes you conscious of physics because it needs the world to be physical. It has some sort of agenda. Your mind has an agenda, and that agenda is to survive. So first it creates itself, and then it makes sure that it sticks around by surviving. This is why death ends up being such a huge threat, and why the fear of death is so great. The reason the fear of death is there at all is because the mind has been lying since the beginning. Death is not real because you're not real. You're not real. So your mind actually invents death because that confirms, that helps your mind smuggle in the idea that it's alive. And it can take a long time to, well, you know now because I just told you, but normally it would take a person a long time to notice that it's doing that because the mind is not obvious. It doesn't show you what it's actually doing. It gives you something, it gives you a piece, it gives you the fear of death, but it doesn't show you that it's only doing that because you don't exist. Like you weren't ever born. Right? The body was born. The body came out of your mom's vagina. The thing you refer to as the body that came out of your mom's vagina. Okay, but that has nothing to do with a you. We still the question is what are you? Sure, the body's there, but that's not what you are. And I've talked about the body and the boundaries of the body in another in another video. So the mind isn't being honest. When you're standing in front of a crowd and you're giving a speech, yeah, it's giving you the nervousness, but it's not telling you that the reason it's generating nervousness is because it wants to feel like your emotions are real. Because if your emotions are real, then there must be a you. And if there's a you, then there's things that are not you. And so, like I said, the mind is doing everything it can to help reality stay as it thinks it is. The mind needs you to be there. So you're nothing but you're like a puppet. So reality exists by itself, and it's puppeteering the feeling and the feeling of you existing. It's puppeteering that into being so that it can have an individualistic experience of itself. The whole thing is one. All of reality is one. But then it tricks itself into thinking that it's more than one, and then that's how it creates you. And of course, the you that I'm talking about that is false, that's not actually there, the thing behind your eyeballs looking through them, there's nothing in there, by the way. Goodness, I can't stop belching. I gotta stop eating before I do these. You're actually something else. So I probably won't get into what you actually are in this video. But I just wanted to, talk about survival and how survival is connected to how you're trying to keep everything put together. So the mind is doing two things at any given time, and they're all for survival. One is survival activities itself, and then one that a lot of people don't think about at all is sanity. So it's difficult because what like you in your present state, just like I was, and just like everybody was at some point, is sanity is completely taken for granted. It's taken so for granted that if you had like a spiritual awakening right now, I mean, you would sob all night, like you would cry all night because you know you didn't realize what sanity was. And you'll actually begin to like if you had a spiritual awakening, you would appreciate sanity so much. Oh my goodness, my appreciation for sanity is like 1,000x what it was before years ago when I first had my first awakening. So sanity and survival. Now sanity, what even is sanity? I'm trying to figure out a way to explain this because I already said that you take it for granted. So like your whole life is mostly sane. There are things within your life that you separate out, you seam them out, and you say, "Oh, that's insane," and this is that's insane, and this is sane. So some examples of that are me meditating, me making a YouTube video, me eating food, me going to the bathroom, me petting my cat, the existence of my house, the existence of ducks, the existence of rabbits, the existence of grass and trees. These are like things you consider to be sane. You're like, "Yep, that's sane." And then like a guy shooting up a school or somebody stealing your car, um, you know, you go outside and you see some of those carnivorous squirrels. You've never seen a squirrel eat another squirrel. You go outside, you see a squirrel eating another squirrel. you might put that in like the box like insane. You might be like, oh, that's crazy, that's insane. So your mind makes like little fake distinctions between sanity and insanity, and it actually does that because it's trying to distract itself from true insanity. So the natural state, the natural, the how would I say this? The original form, your original form is what you are. The original form of the universe, because you are the universe, is insanity. So the original default, the default state of existence is insanity. Now notice that to you, reality seems to be sane. Notice how there aren't crazy things happening. Notice that, every time you go outside of your house, you're still on Earth. You never opened your front door and you've been on the moon, right? You don't wake up on a different planet every day. Every time you go into your bathroom, every time you take a shit, there's actually shit in the toilet. There's not like pixie dust sometimes and candy bars sometimes and gummy worms sometimes. There's not like a basket of kittens in the toilet when you get out the toilet. Notice how what comes out of your ass is it's pretty sane. It's very consistent, and consistency is a key component to sanity when we talk about consciousness. Now, as you're listening to me talk about this, I'm going to continue. I want you to notice how ridiculous what I'm saying sounds. Your mind is going to want to take what I'm saying and is going to want to throw this into the bucket. Swish is going to want to throw this into the bucket called ridiculous or stupid or whatever name it came up with. Just notice that it did that. It probably did that already. I guarantee it did that. Now, also notice, I'm going to point this out to you, is that that's not a mistake. That is the function of the mind, because your mind is trying to make things make sense. So if it even hears something that sounds silly, it has to quickly grab it and like throw it under a category. So categorization is one of the features of sanity. This is one of the ways in which you stay sane, because sanity is important to your survival. If you go insane, if I give you, some drugs or something, or I shoot you in the head and then it fucks up a part of your brain, life might not seem as sane to you. You might experience mania. You may go crazy, things like that. So sanity is very important to your survival as well, because I'm tying this all into survival. Categorization, making categories, is something that the mind does, right? You have so many categories that I could sit right here and you could never click on. This could be an infinite video. If this was a live stream, this could be an infinite video. We could literally sit here and talk about all the categories forever. We would die before we ever got done talking about them. That's how many categories the mind makes in reality. It can take anything and put it into categories. You can take all the species of birds, and then like birds are one category, nested within the category of animals. And then animals are in the category of like things that are alive. And then among the things that are alive, that's different than the category of things that are not alive, like a water bottle or a pen or a notebook or a microphone. And that's in the category of things. And then you can split that up into another category of things versus people, or things and non-things. And a non-thing would be something like a thought. You don't really consider a thought to be a thing, because you normally consider things to be tangible, that you can touch. And then thoughts are in a category of like, I don't know. But you see the point. It's just your mind can slice everything up. There's birds with red eyes, different species of birds. There's, even within that, it's like, let's say you find some sparrows. Okay, well, here's 5 sparrows. Well, there's this sparrow, that sparrow, that sparrow, that sparrow, and that sparrow. So that's 5 distinctions. And let's say you have some pet birds, right? You name them 5 different things. You're constantly making distinctions. And you can take 2 of the sibling sparrows, and you can say, yeah, this is the funny one, and this is the clumsy one, or whatever, right? People do this with their cats. Their cats have different personalities. Let's say you got 2 cats and they both have blue eyes. You can say, but this one has dark blue and this one has light blue. and then you get 3 more cats. You say this one has turquoise, and this one has teal, and this one has sky blue, and you can just the mind has split up reality into infinitely many pieces, which assumes that there was only one piece to begin with. So the reason your mind slices reality up and makes categories is because everything being one thing is not a sane thought to you. It's not acceptable to the mind that it is your neighbor across the street. Your mind doesn't want to accept that you and your neighbor across the street whose dog shits on your lawn, that you two are actually the same entity. The mind doesn't allow you to see that. Your mind does not want to consider that religion, that you made up religion, that you actually, as infinite consciousness, that you are actually imagining religion to be something that's significant about the world, because that's a distraction from you being the source. If the